Thank you for showing up. My name is Micah Brown. I'm the CEO of Film Funder, the first film financing index for the film industry. We have an incredibly distinguished panel of some amazing people who are kind of replacing a couple of people who were going to show up. And I'll start with a left to right introduction. So if we want to go kind of left to right as to kind of what you guys are doing and what your companies do and the space that you work in.
Cool. I'm Jeff Nicholas, co-founder of Uprising Creative and Vehicle VR. At Uprising, we do lots of video production, from music videos for Justin Timberlake and Rihanna to commercials for Bud Light and quite a few others. And Vehicle VR, that's our VR studio that we launched in October of last year, and that has been doing original and branded content in the VR space. We did a Fort Minor music video, which was one of the first music videos in VR, a piece with Kenan Thompson for Cannes last year. We just did a Budweiser 4D experience down at South by. And we just released a piece in Nepal called Safe Schools Nepal that you can find on YouTube 360. And in addition to that, I'm running Vantage TV, which is a live stream platform for VR.
My name is Ryan Pulliam. I'm the CMO and co-founder of Specular Theory. And I co-founded the company with my partner, Morris May, who unfortunately couldn't be here today, so I'm filling in. We started it about 3 years ago and are built from the ground up for VR. So we do a lot of live action cinematic, but we've got capabilities to do everything. Some of our bigger pieces were a series that we have called Perspective, which debuted at Sundance in 2015 and then came back to Sundance this year and Tribeca Film Festival. We also did a project with Paramount and YouTube for the new Terminator, or I guess it's not new anymore, but for the Terminator Genesis movie last year with Google Cardboard, and worked with some top game influencers. And we're just wrapping up a really big project with YouTube again, shooting 8 episodes. That's going to be a whole series and hopefully launching soon.
Nice. I'm David Nussbaum. I run a division of Hologram USA. The founder of Hologram USA, Alki David, is not here, so I'm filling in for him. He's an eccentric billionaire. I am an eccentric thousandaire.
Nice.
Thank you. So Hologram USA, we own the hologram technology most famously used to bring Tupac back to life to perform at Coachella a few years ago. Our technology could bring any late icon, politician, any speaker who is no longer with us, we could bring them back using a bunch of different techniques, and we could project them into an open space, onto stages around the world. We've got partnerships with Whitney Houston's estate, Dean Martin, Bernie Mac, Andy Kaufman, Liberace, Buddy Holly. We've got about 20 artists that we're working with in partnership. And we can also beam anybody from anywhere to anywhere in real time. So recently we beamed Jimmy Kimmel while he was doing his opening monologue. We beamed him to the Country Music Awards live on his TV show. A month ago we took Jack Black, the actor. We beamed him to Spain from Los Angeles to be at a press junket that he couldn't be at. So it is the safest way to campaign. We could beam Hillary or Donald, I guess that's who we're talking about, or Bernie. I guess Bernie's still in the mix. We could beam them anywhere in the country. All right, so that's it. So I will. So that's my spiel. How many you guys want? How many you want to buy?
Nice. My name is Tom Wright. I am the managing director of a company called Entropic. We do. We're in New York, LA, and San Francisco. Visual effects design. We're a kind of creative production studio. I'm also founder of a company called Tactic, which is really why I'm here today. It's a VR, AR, and kind of real-time experience studio. We've done, actually, it's interesting, we did experience for GE using the Musion screen, where it was not Tupac or any past celebrity, but a giant jet engine that people could use gesture control to move around and assemble.
That was a good one, yeah.
Yeah, it was a cool project. And we currently do, it's interesting, we'll get into it later, but I think we do a lot of enterprise work with tech companies, visualizing things. We've done we did an AR app for Cuervo that won a Webby last year, which is kind of great. But that's us, that's me. And I drank a 5-hour energy thing about 20 minutes ago, so if I go bananas, that's why. I just want to put that out there.
Cool. Is it me? Just in time. My name's Andrew Shulkin, and I'm a cinematographer and have been sort of consulting and participating and shooting in a lot of kind of disruptive material, I guess, for kind of what the entertainment business has looked like over the last 5 years, from different ways of doing 3D to interactive experiences with iPads. And so VR, about 2 years ago, a company approached me to kind of understand what VR was, and looking at what in terms of capture and looking at what was available. It was all sort of GoPros, and for the professional applications we were doing, that wasn't something that was going to work for the particular application we were doing, which was a job for Nike. So we ended up building this 18 camera 32K rig, which was good and is great and has kind of continued to work. And then that's kind of trickled into other areas. There was a company formed around that called Headcase that I was a co-founder of, and then there have been a lot of other VR and kind of VR plus experiences, immersive experiences, using a variety of different techniques, both spherical capture and shooting slices and using motion capture and all that kind of stuff. So real practical end.
Cool stuff. So we've got a really high caliber panel here. So I wanted to do a couple of things today. So obviously the title is VR and AR. I also wanted to talk a little bit about the holographic aspect of things. I want us to kind of, for those of us who can, just dive into kind of what the current use case and state of holographic technology is. So for those of you who are either unaware of it or uninitiated, holographic technology just involves currently refracting some light signals or some light waveforms off a recording and then reproducing that. We're going to talk a little bit more about kind of what that really means and how that gets done a little bit. I really do want to kind of focus on the artistic use cases of these forms of technology, though, because I think filmmaking as an art, and it is an art, has always been built around the actual art itself, not the tools used to execute the art. And as long as you keep that at the core of whatever the execution method is, you're going to have an appropriate response from your target audience, and also pricing is going to reflect that. So if we could just, to the degree you can, either talk a little bit about kind of the specific, wherever, excluding IP if you don't want to share IP details, talk where you can about the use cases that you guys have seen and some of the more innovative projects that you've worked on around VR, AR, and if you have a holographic example, that would be great as well. Again, just left to right would be great.
Oh, I get the start. We haven't used any holography, so I'm really interested to hear these guys talk about that. From a capture standpoint, live action, mainly what we're doing at Vehicle and at Vantage is live action capture, whether it be original content, narrative, branded content. And what we're seeing on the technology side is a really rapid advancement in the tools that we're able to capture with. The first piece we did, as mentioned previously, was with GoPros, right? And that's what was available at the time. And now with the Ozo from Nokia and Sony A7 rig that Radiant Images has put together, and a number of other custom solutions, the Headcase rig, who I've been dying to play with, haven't had a chance to yet. There's a number of new technological advancements on the capture side that are making it a lot easier to capture really high-end content, which is what we're all striving for. But that is also allowing us to kind of speed up the post-production flow so that we're not creating necessarily manual stitches just for dailies, that's all happening in real time now, and just going into fine stitching at the end of the process. So I'm really excited about where it's all going. I think we're still very much at the beginning stages of VR technology, and I think in the next 6, 9, 12 months we're going to see a lot of new tools for capturing, whether it be Lightro or which is doing light field stuff, or it be cameras that are specifically geared towards 360 capture that stitch in the camera.
Cool.
Well, I can speak a little bit to just the VR side, but I've actually been incredibly spoiled and blessed to have a partner that has been designing all of our cameras. So we pretty much custom build everything. I think that's been a great advantage for us just because we're able to really drive the creative, and I think a lot of clients are coming to us for that. So I would say almost every rig that we've created in the past 3 years has been its own piece of art. But it's given us the ability to be flexible, and we've got everything from extremely modified GoPros all the way up to Epic Reds to drones. So I just really encourage everybody just to go out there and fail fast, and we keep advancing every day.
Cool. Just a quick note before we go into yours. I think definitely at the core of the use case of any creative piece of hardware is the ability to almost take an agile method to being able to create a piece of content. So something that Specular do really, really well is if someone comes to them with a use case that's kind of a little bit outlandish or difficult to execute, as Ryan was talking about, they design a piece of hardware around that. So yeah, if you guys want to talk about the holographic side, that'd be great as well.
Holographic side. All right. So, you know, the way we project holograms is, you know, it's based on an old theater trick, right? It's called Pepper's Ghost. And scientists came up with this really neat way of beaming one person who can't be on a stage, and he reflected the image a couple of times so that it was able to be seen by a large group of people that couldn't see it, you know, for a number of different reasons. So over the last few hundred years, it's been perfected, and now we have acquired all the patents and the licenses to do what we do. And I think, you know, 4 years ago, almost exactly, at Coachella, Tupac performed on stage. And everybody went nuts. And over 1 billion people have seen it on YouTube. And the thing that brought Tupac back to life for performance wasn't necessarily the hologram of Tupac. It was when Snoop and Dre walked out onto the stage with him, and they started performing together. And this is a guy who passed away 10 years before he did this performance. So what we're doing is we're taking that case study of the amazing global reaction of what happened with Tupac at Coachella, and we're going to use Whitney Houston. We're putting her on stage with living entertainers, and we're going to tour it. People are going to be able to go to a box office at whatever theater we're touring it to, and they will be able to go buy a ticket to see Whitney Houston perform with artists. You'll be able to see Dean Martin perform with, you know, name them, whoever makes sense to perform with Dean Martin. A lineup of stand-up comedians will get to open up for Red Fox, and you'll get to sit in an audience like it's 1972 and Red Fox is at the height of his career. And you're going to be able to get what you may not have ever gotten to see before. And furthermore, all of this is going to happen because, you know, what do you get the rock star that he or she can't already get for themselves? You know, you get, how about the opportunity to perform with the artist that inspired them to become who they are in the first place? So that's what we're doing. We're taking things to the next level. So what ended at Coachella with Tupac doing a one-off performance for a one-time festival, we're taking it to the next level. So all of our artists, all of your favorite artists that have ever performed, who can no longer perform, may be back. And for the haters out there, which there are many, we work in partnership with the estates. We don't just bring anybody back and do anything we want. We work with the estates and the families, and we all work together.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of what we're working on.
Very cool. I think definitely the use case that you talk about there is, yeah, sure, you can create a hologram or you can create a piece of VR, software, hardware, whatever it is. Having that hologram perform with two real people who the previous avatar version of that person knew is where the value really comes in. And I think that talks to what we're going to talk about next once these guys have kind of talked about some of their current technical use cases. How do you cross over the medium of human consumption, art, and the technicality of execution? Because at the kind of the intersection of all of those things is the true value of artistic expression, which we need to take with us as we go through this technological revolution enabled by the creation of Moore's law and all the memory and all the different underlying hardware capabilities that have kind of moved forward in the past 3 years, allowing all of these technologies to sit over that kind of hardware capacity. So yeah, and you know, if you guys could go into some of your use cases, and I really want to kind of talk about and from the perspective of all of you, where you see art coming into each of your mediums and also your markets to a certain degree, because you all target different markets and work with different people. Yeah.
First off, I am not a hater. I will probably be first in line to see Red Fox perform on a Musion screen.
It'll be $50.
I'll gladly fork over $50 for that. You know, to me, as tactic, we entered this a couple of years ago, and there was nothing. There were maybe like 2 camera rigs that people had created and that were out there. We like designed our own and printed our own and worked with GoPros and other sensors and did all this kind of R&D and patented things and all this. And it reminds me of like the early days of the automobile, where people were car companies, like where there were like 600 car companies in the U.S., where it was like someone in their workshop building a car and, you know, like putting it out on the road and trying to, you know, become the car company. And eventually it boiled down into, you know, whatever, like the big six, then the big three, or, you know, whatever it is now, in terms of the U.S. But to me, I kind of see the same trajectory, where a lot of the technical solutions that we're coming up with are awesome, and some of that is sticking, and sensors are getting better, and the players are sort of consolidating and creating tool sets. And to me, that is, as we've seen this all evolve, and we're both engineers and creatives, it just seems like it's rapidly becoming an industry of creatives, or of people who make experiences. And so to me, that's exciting. You know, like I said, a lot of our work has been enterprise work, because that's where the work is right now, in the sort of absence of, you know, massive numbers of headsets. But to me, it's exciting that there is some democratization of tools and consolidation of tool sets, and hardware is becoming awesome. Sensors are getting better. And it really just, like, it's approaching that moment where it's all going to kind of be turned over to artists and people that make stuff, which to me is very exciting. I guess one use case I could point to that we've worked on that was more artful, I mentioned the GE throttle up thing that was really, I mean, it was for a great big giant brand, but really it was a CG experience that was gesture controlled, and it was really just a creative exercise for Creative Week in New York. And that was pretty artful. We do a lot of work with a filmmaker named Marco Brambilla, who does installation films. We did a VR piece for him last year, because he did a Times Square installation that we did all the graphics for. And we did a massive capture of it, just because in this program, the installation ran for 2 minutes at the end of every night for a month on 20 screens in the Times Square area. So to do a capture of that seemed like it was the only way to scale it and create an experience for people, unless they went to Times Square in the middle of the night. So that's a use case of ours, but I am really excited that tool sets are coming into place that are really relevant and strong, and they're getting out to people who are going to make great, great things, because that's kind of at the core of how this is all going to succeed.
Yeah.
I think, like Ryan mentioned a minute ago, so much of what comes to us is different and new, and is always sort of the first time. And I feel like maybe since the Red came out, the market has sort of been willing to accept something that isn't ready yet entirely. And so there's been a lot of kind of beta, there's a lot of vaporware if you go to CES or NAB, stuff that never comes to market, or seems like it's going to be great but never does. And so we end up, number one, there's a lot of kind of interesting stuff out there, and certainly things in the pipeline that are amazing. But inevitably what happens is there's a project where somebody wants to do something that's really new and something really innovative, and so we're always kind of fashioning, like Ryan said, what that's going to be. And it's always something different, and frankly, that's what I'm interested in. I'm more interested in doing something new than kind of doing the same thing over and over again. I think it allows the industry to swell in a good way, and I think that the challenge that, and I'll come up with a use case in a second, but I think one of the important challenges is that there's this intersection of gaming and cinema. And coming from the movie side of things, and also working a little bit on the gaming side too, there's, as these two fields are converging, there's a version of it, because the gaming side in a lot of ways is better, in the sense that you can go anywhere, you can move anywhere, you're not up against these live action challenges. And so I think there's a version where gaming takes over. And I don't necessarily like that future. I think that there's something to be said for that. It's certainly its own unique experience. Not a hater, but I think that the cinematic experience means something. And I think that what we've spent 100 years building it matters. And so a big challenge that we're always coming up with is how to direct the eye, and we have all kinds of different ways of doing that. And a lot of ways we also surrender to not directing the eye, as we usually do in a flat rectangle. But so what I'm finding lately, like over the last 6 months, has been different ways of doing that. And some of that has been with some light field experimentation, and some of that has been with shooting motion capture and live action at the same time, and having elements that can be put into a CG background. Some of that's been with volumetric capture, with photogrammetry, and some of the AI stuff, which is really impressive and is getting bigger, and you can capture bigger volumes. And even using, I mean, there's such a, the most interesting thing, I think, and the real democratization that you mentioned, is that what's happened, I think, over the last maybe 6 or 7 years has been that instead of the top end of the market driving the business, It's the consumer end of the market. I mean, back when automobiles were being made, you couldn't make one in your garage. I mean, some could, but not everybody could. And now everybody can print a 3D printed model for, cameras, which is amazing. I'm not saying everyone should or everyone's good at it, but I think there's something about the democratization of that availability and the fact that that kind of consumer end of the market is driving it.
Cool. So yeah, I want to do some context before the next part of the discussion. So, and now I'd kind of like to, you mentioned a really great point there. We're moving to a more of a consumer-driven market. Now that rolls off the tongue really easily, but what does that really mean? So previously, if you had a piece of content, you went to a distributor. A distributor would either do one of two things with it. They would go to theatrical release, or they try and resell it on, the closed or open market. And then that's what gets you some money to pay back your investors, so on and so forth. What's happened with the modularization of some of the technology that's out there to be able to actually capture content, one, two, process it, and now distribute it through some of the new distribution platforms, is previously where low-budget filmmakers didn't have as much power as users and also as consumers, now they do. So there's this definite segmentation between the actual content creators, of which there's already a content dichotomy, and now content consumers who are really, really informed and have the ability to be able to purchase at a price point something that drives content 2 steps back through the process, that being content producers on the lower budget end. So what does that mean? That means that artistic desire becomes really, really important now. Whereas before you could take a huge budget, mark it out to a million people and make some sort of money, it was fine. Now you're talking about small groups of people who like very specific things to which you need to give some sort of provision of very specific content. The dichotomy has completely changed. So I really want to go into a discussion now from all of your perspectives where you see 2 things. One, for the markets that you work with, the artistic desire that sits there, whether that be consumer, whether it be enterprise, number 1. Number 2, do you see a change in pricing model for those markets, or is it going to stay the same as it currently is? I.e., if you have a piece of content right now and you're aware of how that sells to your current content market, is that going to change given some of the technologies that are coming out in the next year, and also where the VR market is going in terms of taking over things like gaming, and then and also neurocinematics to a certain degree? So those are the 2 questions I would put to each of you.
Yeah, on the artistic side, I think from our perspective, everything we do is centered in some artistic expression. We're not taking on projects. Most of ours are consumer-facing; they're not enterprise, and it really is about crafting a story or crafting a visual, crafting some sort of environment that you can escape into or can lead you down a path of narrative. Our company comes from a design background, so design has always been crucial to everything that we do, and that flows through to all of the filmmaking that we're doing and all of the content creation. In VR, it is a little trickier with live action because you can control the environment, but as mentioned before, you can't control where the person is going to look in that environment. So in a lot of ways, you either have to embrace the production being there, or you have to design in 360, design your environments in 360, and that poses a new set of challenges. Where are you going to hide lights? All the things you guys have probably heard, which is, how do you take traditional filmmaking and the way that you craft that scene and apply some of those rules over to VR? You can't apply most of them. You can apply some of them. We're coming up with new rules that are based in theater and film and new languages that exist really, for VR. So I think, from a use case perspective, like I said, everything we're doing has an artistic element to it. We're not taking on projects that don't. So that's our driving force. On the pricing side of that, it's fucking all over the place. It's all over the place. Like people don't understand. I think that's the one thing. There's a big education component here, both from the client who wants to create content, from the consumer who wants to watch content, about what it means to create this stuff. We get people coming to us all the time that are like, "Hey, I've got $5,000. Can we create this VR thing?" You're like, "Absolutely not." But then at the same time, like some people are thinking that it's way more expensive than it really is in certain capacities. So it's a wild swing, and I think that's going to all level out as people start to understand the technology, understand what high-end capture means versus low-end capture, understand that using a rig like a head case or a custom-mounted or custom-built rig is a different thing than going out there with a little GoPro cube. And the consumer is going to start to see that too. A lot of the demos that you see out now, again, not being a hater, but a lot of the early demos were just that, demos, pretty lo-fi in terms of optics, and they were a great starter. But once you see something that's been crafted with a high-end rig, with real thought and attention paid to the artistic quality, you don't want to watch any of that other lower end content anymore. So,
How
and
would you
again,
say-
it's the same thing as film. Why you
Yeah.
go see film versus go on YouTube and spend hours on YouTube. They both exist, and they both
Yeah.
will exist and coexist. But I'm not going to go to YouTube necessarily to watch a high-end film.
Yeah.
I'm going to go to a theater for that.
How would you say that affects the resale value? So the way packaging takes place, particularly for you guys, how would you say that affects the resale value to some of these guys?
Resale values, it's tricky because up until now there hasn't really been a VR buyer, right? It's been get it out on as many of the free streaming platforms as you can. Now we're seeing Live Nation and Hulu just announced a big partnership at the New Fronts. There's a bunch of stuff happening. Hulu's driving a lot of it actually, where and YouTube as well, where there is a real buyer there for like an intermediary buyer. On the consumer level, they're still getting it for free, and whether or not they'll actually purchase the content is still up for debate, or how they'll purchase. I think they will purchase. It's how will they? Will it be individual pieces of content? Will it be subscription based for series? Will it be an experience that you pay? We don't know. It's all shaking out right now.
Yeah, cool, man.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely agree with all of that. I mean, I think for us and for VR especially, I think it's really the art of storytelling. And I think if you have a great story, whether it's low budget or high budget, it doesn't really matter. It's just focus on that because that's really what drives great content. And, a good example is we had our first piece at Sundance in 2015 and, shot sort of in 220 and it's definitely like pixelated and wasn't perfect. And, we went out there and did it anyway. And the feedback that we got by the time it actually went to Sundance and was being shown to everyone, my partner and I are just like, oh my God, we can't show this. It's terrible because like the advancement in our camera technology had changed so much. We were shooting such higher quality things. And like literally, I mean, there was a 4-hour line to see our piece and not one person mentioned the technology at all. Like it was all about the story. And in this case, it was basically the series is called Perspective, so it's reliving the same event through two different people's perspectives. So in this case, it was a sexual assault, and it was a really powerful story, and it was for the first 5 minutes, you're the guy, and the second 5 minutes, you're the female, and you're at a college party, and sort of these events unfold. And I mean, we still get messages to distribute it now, and to be honest, it's even hard for us to watch just because everything is so much better. But I think it really speaks to this sort of new artistic space and really thinking about, why are you doing it in VR? Because if it can be done in 2D, then it's probably not going to make a great story, and it's probably not great for VR. I think a lot of mediums have a tendency to sort of copy the medium before it. And, of course, there's things out there that are really gimmicky, and that's fine because we're all experimenting. But we're kind of shifting, I think, into this phase of really understanding good content. And I think, the ability to think differently, to use it, like the fact that you can use VR to become another person is a really powerful, incredible tool. And it can't be done in any other medium. So I'm really excited just to see kind of what people come up with and how we're going to create. And, are we going to use HTC Vive to do our storyboards and tilt brush? And, it's rethinking and you're designing not only for the space itself, like the physical space, but you're also thinking about the mental space. I mean, you're really trying to get in someone's head and think and hear. So, sound is really important and how people speak. And so, yeah, I think it's super exciting. And I think, if it's good content, people will pay for it.
Yeah.
So just focus on that.
Cool.
Yeah, that's what, I'm hoping that people do, pay for good content, because it is all about the content. And, I guess the way Hologram USA works is a lot different than, VR and YouTube. Although, Alki David, our CEO, he owns a number of businesses. One is Filmon.tv, which is the world's largest virtual cable company. Essentially, tens of thousands of free movies and documentaries, hundreds of live, streaming television channels from around the world, free app. And we do use some VR and we use 360 cameras because when we do our concerts, you could even see our hologram demonstrations from the app, the Filmon app. You could literally just go to the Filmon app and then download it. It's a free app. And then you can watch our hologram demonstrations from wherever in 360. So, you could, move the camera around and you can see everything. It's super cool. But which I really love. But I think the idea is to get people into the theaters. Anybody can watch any movie in their homes now. It's easy to get a first-run movie and watch it on your 60-inch flat screen, and you've got your man cave, and you can still have that kind of theater experience at home, except you could be in your boxer shorts at home, which actually makes it a little bit better, you know. But with hologram technology, you physically have to go to the place to see it. You know, it is a shared experience. It's not you know, you're not putting on a set of goggles and you're not kind of in your own world. You're sharing this experience with thousands of people at the exact same time, and you're seeing something that's just not real. You know, and that's where the art comes in. We've done panels with holograms built into the panels. I can have a cartoon character walk out on. I think I offended her. I'm not sure. Was it something I said? No? Okay. So you can actually have a cartoon character walk out and sit down and be a part of a panel. That's something like that's never existed before.
So can we get some information on two things?
Sure.
The commercial use case of holograms outside of events,
Okay.
if there is one,
Sure.
and kind of the modularization process. To the degree you can talk about the technology if you need to, of the current price point of creating a hologram experience. So it's quite high. What is the path of that reducing over the next, say, 3 or 4 years and potentially making its way to either the consumer market or at least a lower tier of commercial market? Yeah.
Well, it is very expensive to not only create the product, the content, you know, to put Whitney on stage, you know, costs millions of dollars. But it's going to be worth it. You know, you're going to go to the theater and it's going to be, you know, part narrative, part musical, part, you know, behind the music. It's going to be a documentary. It's going to be a live concert. So there's a lot of money that you know, you got to sink into that kind of stuff. Plus, then that's before you even put the technology in place. We do a lot of, you know, corporate events. We do a lot of expos and conventions. You know, for individual use and home use, you know, I'm not quite sure anybody's ever going to have a, you know, hologram portal in their home. You know, I think that's kind of where VR comes in. I think that's, you know, when you take the VR head goggles off and you want to go to a place and either you're going to, you know, 20,000 people are wearing VR head goggles, or you can go see an augmented reality kind of experience.
Awesome,
But
man.
will the price come down? No, we're going to keep jacking the price way up because we're doing things opposite of everybody.
And then just to take a quick pause here, so there's a definite segmentation, like you just said, between some of these experiences and who they're targeted towards, right? So the hologram experience is probably, like you said, concerts, these kind of big budget, Live Nation, these companies who've got budgets for it. I'd say that there's a crossover as well between some of the content that you see at an event like that and some of the use cases, the home-based use cases for a VR headset or a piece of AR content, and then indeed right down to a wearable like Google Glass. So yeah, if we could come back to both of you guys, market, pricing, in terms of where you see kind of your products and also that part of the market.
You know, in terms of pricing and things like that, you know, with it's interesting. You know, I have an advertising background. I can say that I've worked with both Michael Jordan and Master Chief. You know, this my claims to fame as an ad person. You know, to me, in terms of revenue and things that are going to come, like where the money's going to come from, essentially, you know, until there are a quadrillion headsets out in the world, there's not going to be a massive market, I think, for purchased content or subscribed content by consumers. But I do think, you know, like advertisers they're always right there. You know, like there are already people heat mapping VR experiences and creating sort of like medium depth analytics out of, you know, experiences within VR, tracking what products you're looking at and things that you're, you know, observing and who you are, and like that's all happening. Like it's for sure happening. So I think revenue is going to come from that in one sense. Right now, we're in sort of like you said, like there isn't like a model for it. But I do think that advertisers are going to jump into it as soon as there's a hint of maturity and start buying information, and all that's going to happen. So I think there's a revenue stream that's going to come from that.
Yeah.
And in terms of, I don't know, is that
That's mostly it, pricing and market. Yeah, no, it's great.
pricing and
Well, I
market?
think, sorry, just to add, but I mean, brands are paying for this type of content right now, and they're seeing success, and there may not be a ton of KPIs, but in terms of just having earned media, and I think it goes back to sort of your artistic comment too, is that's the idea. We're no longer just creating billboards or just content to have content. It's like,
Right.
it's up to brands now to kind of have their own media and media channels, and they want to be unique, and they've got to create more content than ever. And I think
Absolutely.
from the consumer standpoint, it's really, you kind of move from being a spectator to actually living this experience. And so you're really creating these first person memories. And I think that's a very powerful artistic and,
No, I definitely agree with
technically
you. So I
savvy
think
thing.
market-wise, there's, again, another segmentation that definitely you guys are probably aware of. There's, to a certain degree, the resale market, which isn't as mature yet, but as you mentioned, YouTube, Vimeo, some of those guys are in that space. There's the sponsorship market, which is huge right now. So there's a lot of discussion around kind of some of the projections that some people have made about the VR industry going where it's said it's going to go. There have been projections out there that says the next 3 years it's going to be worth $20-30 billion. If there's any indication from the sponsorship appetite, which usually comes before a consumer appetite, as it has with iPhones and previous other kind of high-end technology products, as long as that sponsorship appetite is there for reselling it to those either consumers or third parties, then that's when the market actually develops and fulfills its potential. So yeah, to a certain degree, I would say that the formulation of the market isn't as structured as it could be. Definitely the market potential is already there, though.
Well, it's interesting because one of the biggest stumbling blocks for sponsors or for any brand or anybody creating or wanting to create immersive content in any kind, whether it's 360, AR, VR, when you really boil it down, right now there's a huge distribution channel open and available now. It's multi-tiered. Not everybody has the HTC Vive, so you're not going to always get. You're not going to be able to take that type of an experience and leverage that across a mass market. But what you are able to do through YouTube 360 or Little Star or Facebook 360 is go all the way down the chain to 360 video, right? And 360 video is not VR, let's be clear, but it is a building block of VR. It's a building block of an immersive experience. And so you can create something that's a super high-end experience that you can demo out on the road, and you can take to locations, and people who have the high-end headsets can experience it. But then they can take it home and they can have a $20 cardboard and watch immersive content in an immersive way, or they can pick up their phone and watch it. And you can, it's 1 in 4 people use, or I think it's 1 in 3 now use Google Chrome around the world. And Chrome plays 360 video. So you can now reach 1 in 3 people around the world with this content. So that's changed the game for us. That's where sponsors come in. That's where people come in with budget, because they're starting to understand real ROI on it. It's like, look, I can reach 6 million people with this piece of content, very quickly, rather than, oh shit, can I only reach like 10? You know what I mean? It's like, it's definitely changed the game.
Yeah.
I just want to jump in. 5 of the projects that I've shot were sponsored by Samsung, and one of them was a 11-part series that they spent $4 million on. And so Samsung obviously has a vested interest because they have the headsets that don't have content. I'm dealing with this right now with Sony because Sony is coming out with PlayStation VR and they don't have enough content. So there's a hunger for content, and Samsung entered into a bunch of different brand partnerships in order to kind of sponsor these individual projects at at like $1 million each, like big money in terms of what this costs. The issue is that, and I also, in addition to shooting, I end up kind of consulting with folks on how to use it. And the first case is always, who's going to see it? I'm not convinced. How many are out there? How many gears are out there? How many cardboards are out there? Where are we going to, what's our target destination? And the hang up is that so some stuff will go on YouTube 360 and Facebook and that kind of stuff, but a lot of stuff won't. They don't want their stuff on YouTube. And we did a big project for the Strain last year for Comic-Con, and if you weren't at Comic-Con, you can't see it. It's a problem for me as a cameraman. I can't show you. It's like, and there was a cease and desist thing, not related to me, but it's one of the partners. It's like, you can't share this stuff. So if it's an activation site or it's like one of these kind of specialty events, which is where they're putting down some money, so it becomes this kind of specialty experience, a little bit like the hologram, even though it's kind of a democratic experience where kind of anyone can get it. We can live stream it at the same time. People can see it. We can kind of gang headsets together. At the end of the day, it's kind of like, how are you sharing it? And ultimately, where is it going to live forever? And so then I think what people want to avoid, what the market is kind of shying away from, is these kind of individual experiences where Samsung has an app, and Apple has an app, and everyone has these apps. Like, I don't want to download all those apps.
Yeah.
I want to have one destination.
That's a really good point. So I think something essential, which I'd love to kind of bat out back to you guys for opinions on, is how do we take the medium itself and divorce it from some of the art that's tried to be expressed through that medium, right? So a lot of kind of filmmakers, companies, like you mentioned, they're creating apps, they're doing all these different things, which is essentially just a means of distribution. How
A unique means.
Unique means. How do we take the point of making those means of distribution, which is the content that goes on it, ensure that there's a high enough quality and enough of a reach out to demographics who want that type of content without compromising the use of which medium you're trying to get it through? Love opinions on that. And that's just open. Anyone who wants to answer can.
I would say, I have probably the least to say about this, but I would say second screen experiences, where you're able to kind of use a Vive or use a cardboard or use, that alongside your experience online or your experience in a movie. That's how I've seen it in a small way that I think will grow.
Yeah.
There's a couple of different pieces that, like one thing that kind of hit me was Hulu's doing their skinny bundle, which they just announced, where they're taking, a bunch of different traditional media channels and packaging them up and being able to get that online without having to have a cable provider. Well, before that, when you zoom all the way out and you talk about cable providers and you talk about these bundles, these were all individual channels, right? That's what all of that is, and it's been bundled together by a cable company and delivered in a way that's consumable, right? We all just flip through the channels now. I think, there's a model there, who knows if that will actually evolve, where, everybody who's releasing their own individualized versions of this all get sort of put together, and you can experience all of these through one destination. So you're not downloading all these different apps. Now, again, that takes there's a lot of deal that has to happen between that. And right now, it's very siloed. It's starting to get very siloed. It was very collaborative in the beginning. Now it's very siloed. And everybody's trying to race to be, the number one, the Netflix of VR is what you hear a lot. So how that will all shake out and where that all goes, we're years away from it, I think. You're going to see a lot of individualized methodologies of distributing content. But the other side is like the AR VR piece, right? So VR, you're in a black box. AR, you're in a transparent box. Like, that's essentially the difference between them. And I think in a lot of ways, AR is going to be more impactful in our lives and is going to help that content divorce from the medium or the means of distribution quicker. Because if I'm sitting in this room and I've got the ability to see everything that is important to me in this room, and it's useful in the same way that my smartphone is useful, and that goes back to holography too. It kind of brings in elements into the real world that don't exist there. That starts to change the dynamic of how you're using it. It becomes part of your everyday. And then VR is where you go to experience something to disengage from that world. So Magic Leap is making a huge inroads on AR. No one knows really what they're working on. It's so secretive. But what they are working on is bringing those two worlds together. So I think, we're years away from seeing that sort of like ubiquity and ease of distribution. I think it's going to be really segmented until then. But we're light years away from where we were 2 years ago at the beginning of this, where everybody was just trying to figure it out.
Yeah. So then the next thing I kind of wanted to talk about a little bit is personalization of experience, right? So one of the things that kind of Netflix do really, really well, Amazon to a certain degree do really, really well, or it's debatable, is they personalize content. What role does personalization of content play in the current mediums that we're looking at, 360, VR, AR? How far are we away from a true personalization of content using a medium on any of those things? And how does that impact the expression of art? So does the commercial value of creating a bunch of action films outweigh something like Specular Theory's project being personalized? What's the counterweight there? I'd love to get some opinions on that.
So by personalized, you mean like the sort of the
Recommendation
engine?
personalized based on any data that you have, just any type of personalization. Yeah.
I mean, it seems pretty platform dependent, right? Like the platforms that personalize have all your data and all your information. They know everything you've seen, and you have an established relationship with that platform. And I think in the absence of that, you're not going to have it, right? Like, I mean, I think as those platforms become consolidated and useful, and people really become as addicted to them as I am to some of the entertainment platforms, you're kind of not going to have that.
Yeah.
I think Facebook will drive that, because I think sort of like you've seen like Take This Lollipop and these other kind of things where
Sure.
or Google Plus, where you are all, I think it's it's inextricably linked with privacy. And I think that as people kind of relinquish more and more of their personal details, I think you end up having, in the way that you were describing a minute ago, where I can be in this space and all these screens are something that I've been looking at on Amazon. It's super irritating, but it's inevitable. And it's the way that people are going to make money in this space.
It's cool. So then,
There's
like,
another side to that too,
Yeah.
though, is like what we're doing over at Vantage is live stream events and live stream and VOD event capture. And we just did Coachella. We did a full package for Coachella. And what's coming in about 60 days are the ability for you to watch full concerts in 360, 7-camera capture, better seats than you could have gotten if you were standing at the back of the room. And the bet there is that people are going to want to see that in that type of an environment. We don't know exactly how that's going to work and exactly how it's going to sell, but we do know that when we put it on and we're there, it's amazing. But what's missing is the ability for me to lean over and be like, hey, check that out, or have an interaction with people around me. So that's part of the technology stack that we're building into that, where you can be there with your friends or with additional people.
Shared presence.
It's not avatars, it's no bullshit like that, but it's like, you're able to communicate, you're able to talk while you're watching this thing. That's a different type of personalization, but it's where that experience is now personalized to me because I shared it with my friends, which I think is super important.
And then opinions on the weigh-in between the commercial value of going for content that works on these platforms really, really quickly versus impactful content. So going for impactful content has the effect that you'd see over a long term of engaging people with those platforms. If in the short term you go for kind of like a bunch of action movies, which are great, and the studios will love and they'll buy it from us, but that's going to shape the perception of those platforms over a long period of time and how much engagement they actually garner and how much of the market potential they actually fulfill. So I'd love to get some opinions on what's kind of more makes more practical sense for these platforms, that being VR, AR, 360, to a certain degree holography as well. Is it kind of the short-term bells and whistles, shiny things, or a more engagement-based roadmap in which you create content around people's demographics?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the goal is always just to create great content, and let's be honest, there's a lot of crap content out there right now. But that was kind of, we started out doing a little bit of AR stuff in the beginning, and I totally agree. It's, Magic Leap and HoloLens are going to be amazing, and it'll circle back and be bigger. But the problem we kind of found in the beginning was just that, you kind of create something and like turn a poster into a video, and that's great, and someone thinks it's really cool, but then they like delete the app after. They never go back. So I think with VR, what we've really found is that people like want more. Like they watch something and they're like, oh, I want to see it again, or did you see this part? I didn't see it. And they're like fighting over the headset. And I think the goal is to create engaging kind of episodic pieces. And if it's not episodic, then at least just make it a very memorable experience and don't make it gimmicky. And I think because everything is so new right now, it's almost hard to play it safe because none of the rules apply. But we have seen pieces where people, I think, are not thinking about it the right way, and then it just turns into be like, I've just watched so many pieces that just have no story. You're like, why am I here? What's happening? And so I think it's just a matter of people really understanding.
People
the
talk
medium.
about presence all the time, and I'm a firm believer that presence is not enough at all. Like you have you have to have story. You can give someone presence, you can take them to the top of a mountain, you can do all these things, and that's fine. But if there's nothing more than that, all it feels like is, oh, well, that was great. Maybe I flipped open a history book. I mean, like, it has to be deeper than that.
Yeah.
Yeah, because then why wouldn't you just watch it on TV or film? And I
then
mean, I think a
also-
lot of people think it's supposed to deter you from one of these other mediums, but it's not. It's like, this will be the third screen. You're still going to go to the movies. You can still watch stuff on your laptop, and you still have your mobile phone, and you use all of those devices for different reasons at different times because whatever. And I think VR is just, it's another device that you'll use when you
And
when
then
you
the
use it for
holography
different
angle on
reasons.
that.
Yeah, for us, it's, we've discovered that when a hologram shows up somewhere,
Randomly.
so do randomly. We've actually randomly had holograms show up places, and we've noticed that massive audiences show up at those places. We took one of our greatest case studies ever is that underdog politician Narendra Modi, who was running for the seat of Prime Minister in India, he from the safety of his own green screen studio in Delhi, without leaving his own safety, no security, no incredible flights, no, massive, wear and tear over the course of an entire campaign, beamed himself into 100 mobile hologram projection areas every single day over the course of his campaign. And this is in India, 800 million registered voters. He got in front of tens of millions of people that he never would have gotten in front of if not for this ability to beam in front of them. And this is a guy that not a lot of people knew about, but they showed up because there was a promise of this technology. And when he got them there, he said enough to get them to vote for him. He's now the new Prime Minister of India. They voted for him in a landslide victory. So although content is king, right? It's everything. You could just get people there with the promise of this technology, especially people that have never seen it before. So it is changing politics. Speakers, Tony Robbins is beamed in front of dozens of cities at the same time to inspire. It's super cool.
Then just one more quick thing around kind of this cross-genre or cross-industry disruptive effect, if you will. Do you think that there are certain industries, let's just keep it to media, so sub-industries within media, whether that be distribution, whether that be theatrical distribution, whether that be kind of partner-based distribution, that are particularly going to be affected by these mediums, and how?
I have a education, I know that this isn't a media industry, but education on the VR side is really interesting to me. It's sort of outside of what I normally do. Like we're making music videos and we're crass and we're, you know what I mean? But like when we took this trip to Nepal and we covered the education challenges in Nepal after the earthquake a year later. And what we found that really inspired me was putting a cardboard headset or a Gear VR headset on some of these kids who have, they have nothing, right? Like they're literally barefoot, they're walking 2 hours to school over rubble. The schools are just completely destroyed. It's an appalling situation. But we were able to put them into these headsets and show them New York, like we put them in Times Square. This was presence only. We really just made it about presence for this initial thing. We put them in the middle of Times Square, we put them on a beach in Hawaii. And you watch their fucking heads explode, Sure. And like you watch the older people who are there, the parents that, everybody in these villages that are just like, oh my God, I've never seen anything like that before. And the transformative aspect of that for education is really, really powerful. If you think about, the fact that a cardboard headset can cost $5 wholesale to make, it'll be even cheaper when you go really mass on it. And you're able to get that in the hands of some people that already have smartphones. Everyone in Nepal has a smartphone. They don't have running water sometimes, but they have a smartphone and a power strip to plug it into. And they can access the world that way. That's powerful, right? And then the other side of it too is my daughter. I've got a 5-year-old daughter. First time I put her in a VR experience, we have tried to take her to 3D movies. She could care less, whether it's in 3D or not. If it's animated and it's funny, she'll go see it. It doesn't matter 3D. First time I put her in a VR headset, she lost her mind. And she was like, oh my God, this is amazing, right? The transformative nature of that, you don't want to put a 5-year-old kid in a headset for too long. But the fact that it changed her perspective and it gave her something that she was like, oh my God, I want more of this. Yeah. It just goes to prove, there's no filter there with a 5-year-old, right? That it goes to prove how powerful this can be.
Any more opinions on specific industries?
Movies. I mean, the reality is that the screen in my house and probably everybody's house here is better than most movie screens in the world. With the exception of maybe the ArcLight, right when they've changed the bulb. It's just like you have a better experience. And so at a time when studios are doubling down to kind of attain more viewers, but also create these experiences like Barco where you have this kind of wider experience and there's additional screens and all this stuff, it's like you're marinating people in your product. And then same is true, of course, in the advertising business. So if you can get people to put it on, it's a no-brainer.
So yeah, funny you mentioned advertising. So what do you think, because Ryan, you were talking like a lot of the guys that you work with, pay hand over fist for these services, which is completely justified. They're great services. What do you think is a key quantification method going forward though? So is it going to be along the lines of user metrics? Is it going to be more the sponsorship route? How do you quantify the worth of a VR product? And how do you then express that to institutions and or even consumers? What's the best way to do that? I've been on a ton of panels. That is my business, yeah, to a certain degree. But I've been on a ton of panels before where we talked about how old CPM is. From the artistic perspective, how do you quantify the value of art from the perspective of all of your different businesses and the people that you work with when you do work with them?
I think it is. There's a model for that. Like working with like Joseph Kaczynski on a TV commercial costs more than not working with Joseph Kaczynski. Right? Yeah. I mean, so there's that exists. I mean, I think the value of quality and the value of craft and the perceived value of it to consumers and an audience is what drives price. I mean, just in production, period. I think that is that's going to hold sway until something else comes along as a metric or
Yeah.
something more technical.
I mean, to distill that down, if it's good, it will sell.
Yeah.
If it's good content, there will be a market for it.
I mean, I think it's still early. Like, we're waiting on, we're going to have analytic platforms, and there's really no de facto standard right now for that, which is also exciting because we kind of have the opportunity to create one. With YouTube 360 and Facebook 360, you do have views. A lot of times we talk to brands, and I mean, to have earned media like that, like we did the Terminator piece on YouTube even about a year and a half ago now, and I mean, it got 1 million views in less than 2 weeks, and there wasn't even a press release that went out. Like, we just worked with an influencer, and she posted it on her channel, and there's kind of little hacks you can do that way. But I mean, I think on another level too, just the kind of maybe not quantifiable metrics, but quantifiable is, the Sundance piece in perspective. Like, it was so powerful, we got invited by the Speaker of the House to show the entire piece to the California State Assembly. So we're sitting there, showing a date rape piece essentially in VR to all of Congress in California, and it speaks volumes. Especially, we were obviously nervous about it, but it went over really well. And then just little things too, like I was showing a surf experience we did where you get barreled, and I was giving a talk and giving out demos, and a guy in a wheelchair came up and wanted to see our VR, so I showed him the piece, and he literally takes the headset off and looks at my partner and I, and is just like, I've never known what it's like to stand up. Like, he's been born with muscle dystrophy, he's been in a wheelchair his entire life, and like, he's never even known what it's like to stand up, like much less on a surfboard or have like an eye-to-eye conversation. And I mean, when you see people those are two sort of extreme examples, but I mean, you can argue all day long with brands and advertisers, but the whole idea is to like engage and immerse your consumers into a lifestyle or something you believe in. And when just that alone was just so incredible, like I'd much rather get that response from someone that has literally changed his life than worry about however many views I got yesterday on YouTube and were they meaningful. Like, I think brands can visually see, especially at, live events are a great example too. Like, people are lining up. Like, I can barely have a meeting at a coffee shop in LA because there's like a line formed around the block because they want to try VR. And so I think, I think there's ways like that they're seeing a lot of success, and people are talking about it, and then they try the experience, and then they go on social media, and then they're tweeting about it and posting about it and liking and commenting. And so there's definitely engagement, and I think it's just going to get better as soon as we have more in-depth analytics.
Yeah. So I also want to kind of back this out a little bit. There's, I think, a lot of sentiment attached to some of the capabilities that this technology allows, as you just clearly demonstrated. How do you think that sentiment couples with some of the existing standards right now? So exactly like you said, for some brands, for some really big companies, they quantify everything in terms of views, in terms of CPM, in terms of dollar spent, in terms of cost per head, cost per benefit. There's to a certain degree, unquantifiable human sentiment aspect, which has never really been fully expressible because we haven't had the mediums to do that, which some of these things now are. What effect do you think that's going to have on the entire commercial market? Do you think it's going to be kind of a terraforming of the way the market works to be more based around artistic models, or is it going to be a fad that then goes into some sort of new measurement system which stops that from happening? Love to get some opinions on that.
I don't think it's a new, like an artistic model, but it is something where anything that is remarkable or anything that is spectacular or that's really engaging to an audience, like that's going to be of interest. And I think to your point before about earned media, like it's enormous, and if it is a really spectacular experience, and if the content is really great, or if it's really emotional or really spectacular, brands and commercial people are going to invest in it. They're going to take the chance. I mean, for a while, they're going to see how it works. But I think anything that's new that creates that much interest in an audience, people will take the chance on without specific metrics and without a specific return, just because they know that it's going to get them something, and they're going to be seen as on the frontier of something or providing an experience that's remarkable for people.
Yeah.
I think there's a race right now with brands to say, I did a VR piece. It's very much this year we're feeling it, where everybody is doing a VR piece. Every conference you go to, it's literally everywhere. And that's good and bad, right? Because that sentiment side of it, if you have a bad experience, if you get motion sick, if it's just terrible content, you're going to walk away from that going like, well, that brand delivered me this terrible thing, right? But if it's a great experience, like the Nike one, or like some of the other high-end pieces, that you walk away from that with sentiment of like, holy shit, that was amazing. And so such and such brand brought that to me. Hey, you have to check out Nike and what they just did. Like the virility, or the viral nature of that is so much.
We're quoting that one. It's going to Wikipedia.
I think that makes it different.
It's so much more impactful though, because you had an experience. You didn't just watch something. They say, like, some of the research on VR is that when you remember a VR experience that you had, you remember it, your brain remembers it as if it were an actual experience. So instead of it being like watching a film and having that experience of the thing you saw on the screen, it's as if you were there in your, months later.
That's
from
a memory.
Yeah.
So one of the really interesting things about this as well is some of these fields came from scientific experimentation, right? So to a certain degree, if you were to go back to kind of the 60s, 70s, 80s, even the late 90s to a certain degree, or early noughties, a lot of the industry, the media industry then, was what? Paid TV, studio films. Why would we spend however much money experimenting on stereoscopic feedback devices or haptic feedback devices? Yet now here we are, because of the fact that there's been circa 10 years of experimentation for this industry to develop. So I'm sure most of you are familiar with this, but the VR industry didn't just jump out of nowhere. There have been 2 or 3 start and stops where the technology's either not been there, the market's not been there, the desire's not been there. We're at a point now where a lot of those things intersect, which is why we're seeing the aspect of appetite that exists. So I want to get some opinions very quickly on what degree you think further scientific research and also some of the commercial companies really recognizing that and branching towards that in terms of new platform and medium development plays in the development of these existing markets. So how does kind of the commercial aspect, which people look at, play into the scientific aspect, and are there new markets which can be explored from there? That's a lot of questions.
That's a lot to unpack.
Can we talk about commercials some more?
Do you just mean with data? Or?
Generally, where do you see scientific research playing a role in commercial application for some of these platforms?
I think with this stuff, it's sort of hand in hand. I think I'll put it in context of the challenges we've found with working across creative and studios and entertainment and tech, right? Like on the tech side, the developers are gods. On the creative side, the producers and directors are gods. You put them in a room together and you say, here's this new technology that requires a lot of tech and a lot of science, and we want you to tell a story with it. And each one of them is coming at it saying, like, no, my side's the most important. You need all of this technology. You need it. And the director's like, no, I don't need any of that. I need to just tell a good story. Just give me tools for that. And there's a lot of butting of heads, and there's a lot of working it out. And so they're feeding each other, and I think they go hand in hand. Like, all of that is getting smoothed out. Entertainment's understanding that science and tech is really integral in these new technologies, and science and tech is really understanding that without a story, without content, without a reason to use it, that it doesn't matter. So I don't know that you can tease them apart at all. I think they, I guess if anything, it brings them together in a way that we've never seen science and tech integrated with entertainment.
Yeah.
Can I just suggesting? I think that the important piece about technology in the art form that we're talking about is that it allows the business to continue iterating. And I think that the thing that we haven't talked about, maybe it's a little bit controversial, is what happens when people get fatigue from VR. When like you've had enough, like I saw it was cool, it was great, it was horrible, it was wonderful, and then okay, now what? In a year from now, once everyone's done it and everyone knows it's really expensive and now we can't afford it, or it becomes more versatile, or we're going to go the game. I just had this job this morning that went away. They're going to go the gaming route, where it's all going to be game engine, but they did the exact same project last year. And so you have that kind of go on. And I think there's the piece of technology that I'm interested in is using kind of robotics and artificial intelligence. And we have a project right now where it's for a beverage brand, and using an avatar. Whenever you kind of see this brand, your avatar will reach in this kind of augmented reality way and pick up that bottle and drink it.
Yeah.
And it's sort of, it goes to personalization, and it goes to these kind of different ways that advertising is reaching out in a new technology way that keeps it from stagnating.
I asked that question because there's a recent field our company's been working called neurocinematics, and also to a certain degree what you talk about. What happens once you get to the end of this iteration of a scientific product which affects commercial change? And I think there's an important kind of realization there that currently doesn't happen in some of the studio rooms, and also to a certain degree some other commercial places, that scientific research is important, simply because every now and then something like a VR or a new holographic capability comes along, which actually came from research. So if there's, I think, more of a correlation between commercial industry and research, these fads won't be fads anymore, because people will understand the scientific landscape a little bit more in terms of what's available and can be used commercially.
I mean, I think well, I'm just gonna say, like, I mean, between Oculus and HTC and Facebook and these big companies, I mean, some of the smartest people on the planet are working on this, and we're fortunate, to have them do this research and really study the science, because you're messing with your own, like, the human body. I mean, there's a lot of ocular science and audio, and even the way that your ear is shaped can affect audio, and there's a lot of things to figure out there, because we're not, in traditional media, there's always a space that exists between the screen and yourself. And, with VR, it's like you're in it,
Yeah.
and that's like how it affects your brain and everything else. But I mean, it doesn't concern me at all. I just
On that
think they'll
point,
keep-
which is a really great point, so things like on the Oculus headset, there was, I think, a 30 millisecond or 30 nanosecond stereoscopic delay, which is one of the reasons the headset was so big. The founder was able to get that down from something like 80, 90 seconds in previous iterations of that product. So I want to get some opinions from you guys as to what you think potential kind of the health side of this does to commercial application, if it's something that's even worth discussing, or...
Well, I think back on the last topic, one of the big drivers is going to be enterprise, and is going to be other. We're talking about entertainment right now, and that's all fine and dandy. But the reality is, like, when it comes to medical research, when it comes to manufacturing, even, like, there was a guy on another panel, I think it was Digital Hollywood last time, who his company built the VR cave for Land Rover. And they built the new Land Rover in VR, and they only did one clay model instead of 5 that cost $1 million each. And the only reason they did that clay model was because they wanted to make sure that this thing they designed in VR only actually worked. So I mean, when you talk about application like that, that's where it starts to really, like, get entrenched, and then from there, entertainment gets to blossom out of that. Cool. So I mean, it is more scientific and mechanical than anything.
Yeah. Something about standards, though. I think that there's this company I work with called Applied VR, and they do some really interesting kind of research, and they are focused on smoking cessation and all these other kind of PTSD and really interesting stuff in that space. And so they have on their board a researcher at Stanford who does a lot of this kind of VR research. He's connected with Jeremy Bailenson. Anyway, ton of research on what VR does, and it's longitudinal. It's going on for 20 years. And they said resolution doesn't matter. And in general, that's true. But it depends on, we've talked about education and medical and all these different things. They said color doesn't matter. Well, maybe not if you're talking about smoking cessation, but it does if you're selling Tide. It really, like, it depends on who you're talking to.
Yeah.
I think it does make a difference, what end of the business we're talking about.
So I'm going to open it up to questions now. I'm sure a ton of you have questions. We've talked about a lot of different things. This gentleman right here.
I'm quite familiar, and you spoke a little bit about the mobile application of AR, VR, and I'm even talking to people that are involved in that, but I'm really curious on the hologram, the holographic application potential of that moving forward, if that's something that, because again, bring it back to the consumer level, and you can personalize that, that just to me is an unbelievable untapped potential there. I'm just curious on your take on that. It wouldn't be the same, clearly, as it would be in a live theater, but some sort of iteration of the hologram from the mobile phone. I'm actually,
Right.
Maybe it's an avatar,
Sure.
Something like along those lines.
Yeah, I mean, we project, 2D images into open spaces. So it gives the illusion of a three-dimensional person or object. So when you're looking at it on your phone, or when you're looking at it on TV, you're going to see it as a two-dimensional object, along with everything else that's two dimensions. It's pretty great to see it on TV. We're working with a major television show right now, which is where I came from. We were building a hologram rig for a TV show where one of our holograms will be performing pretty soon. I can't talk about, but so I came straight from there. So there will be, tens of millions of people all watching their televisions or watching their streaming devices or their tablets or whatever, and they're going to be able to see the holograms as a shared experience, but not be there. There was maybe 20 or 30 or 40,000 people that saw Tupac perform live, but it's over 1 billion people have seen Tupac perform on YouTube. And that is sort of how these things go viral. Mariah Carey, our technology beamed Mariah Carey into 5 countries at the exact same time. There was a countdown timer, 5 hours, 4 hours, 3 hours, and people just started, nobody even knew, it was just giant Christmas presents sponsored by T-Mobile. They sponsored every Christmas present giant T-Mobile logo in the corner of every Christmas present, and then the countdown timer, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, the sides open up, revealing Mariah Carey performing, and nobody even knew that she was a hologram. And her background singers and dancers, they were performing literally in every country. They were really standing on stage. And then after the first song, this was a Christmas surprise. You could Google it or YouTube, whatever. And at the end of the first song, she transitions into another outfit, but she's hit with like a sparkle and butterflies fly away, and then she comes back wearing a different outfit. And when that happened, everybody picked up their phones and started taping it.
Yeah.
And that is, and those videos are the ones that go viral.
Yeah.
Those are the ones that are seen, millions of times.
You're talking about like Princess Leia coming out of your phone, though, right? Like,
I don't have that. I'm answering it the way I can answer it.
So I think there's
Looks like
definitely two
AR,
parts to
though.
your question there as
part of the
well,
AR thing.
to a certain degree.
Right.
The commercial application of a hologram and its possibility of being used with a mobile phone. I think we're probably, and you can probably talk to this a little bit more than me, we're years away from mobile capability to project realistic holograms. I think in terms of the ability to be able to have holographic experiences shared through mobile mediums is probably closer to, and you can inform better than me on this, but I think those are the two kind of parts to your question. So we have to move on, sorry. Let's go with this gentleman right here.
Looking at the mobile, 70% of content absorption is mobile. And I've been looking at the technologies, cameras, amazingly good stuff, but the delivery platforms and the rendering capabilities of a lot of these cellular systems can't do justice to the quality. When you see this transition,
well, it's interesting. Like if you look at HLS now and what HLS is able to do with streaming of 4K content, H.264, H.265 content across a cellular network, it's actually it's getting up there. You can deliver a pretty amazing video experience through that technology. I think we're kind of there to be able to stream it. It's just, do people want to pay for the data that they're consuming? Is the other side of it, because you're going to push a lot of data across the pipes.
All right, we got 5 minutes, so we got time for 2 more questions. This gentleman right here, and then this gentleman right here.
So first a comment, I work with Nielsen in consumer neuroscience research, and I'll just let you know we're doing a lot along what you're talking about with metrics. So we'll talk later, but if you want metrics on VR and AR stuff, it's coming around a bit. My question is sort of related to this, so you alluded to it. I've heard the head case stuff about it last year at SIGGRAPH when we talked. Obviously the limitations in VR have to be, it's around visual perception, right? And I've always noticed when it comes to presence that people, as soon as they get immersed in it, the first thing they want to do is reach out and touch something, and that's when they realize they don't have hands, they don't have an avatar on their body. What do you think are the big things we're missing to really make the narrative experience go from something that's purely passive and you're trying to force it into something that's really more engaging? Is it haptics? Is it the social presence, the eye tracking, so you can keep your eye line with the virtual haptics? What do you think is missing that would really take you to the next step?
I think with things like the Vive, you have it. It's handset controlled, but it's a very active experience, and you do have the ability to affect things. It's such a different thing, between captured content and kind of like the CG or photogrammetry experience inside of Vive, or the Oculus. Like, you do kind of have that interactive ability, and it is very it's very real time. Like, you really feel like your hands are your hands, and you can also do it with head-mounted cameras to sort of have actual hands to be able to feel like you're touching something, or that you can interact with your environment.
I'm really looking forward to haptic, real spatial audio, through a personalized, environment, headphone environment, and also volumetric, like you mentioned earlier, what the guys at 8i are doing and some of the others. I think that stuff starts to push the storytelling in a whole new way. I think the convergence of interactive and storytelling, that or film and game, if you want to look at it that way, is going to be a really strong driver of this stuff.
I think also real-time rendering, and what this gentleman said is when you finally have phones that are of a resolution that you can have at least 1080 per eye, and it looks sharp, and you're not set back from the screen. That'll make a big difference.
Yeah. Go ahead.
I work in the Broadway business, and my question is about holograms, actually. Can you take a Broadway show, a musical, or even a small play, and not just do a single character, but the entire play in a hologram, say with celebrities, and beam it somewhere? And what would the equipment be like at the local point, at the visual, at the audience point?
Right.
Is that something that is economical, or could it be uneconomical?
Okay, so for those in the back that didn't hear, so I'm being asked about can I beam a Broadway show? Can I film it and then beam it? Yeah, I can totally do that. So we can take Jersey Boys, for example, and we can shoot it with a single camera. If it's lit the proper way, we shoot it either on black background or green screen, and we render it and we add some cool special effects, and there's some time to that. I'll add some animation to it. We'll put the set pieces in using animation, some editing, and then I'll literally take that footage and then I can beam it onto our projection stage. Our projection stage is built out of a lot of truss, and there's some plastic materials that are put into place. We have patents on the way the projectors are mounted and what it's reflecting off of. But you can also do something really cool, like we're talking to the James Dean estate or the Humphrey Bogart estate. We can take a character that was made famous by these actors. We could bring them back and we could cast around them. So you can have James Dean in Giant, the stage play, and then he is the character, and all the other players around him are live on stage. So you could take either a live show and then either in real time beam it into multiple cities, pre-record it, play it back, or you can create something brand new using famous dead stars.
Because when I saw that the one piece it's very dark. Does it need to be on a dark background, or can it be, will the hologram work on a lit stage?
Yeah, we've done it on lit stages too. Generally what we do is we have projectors that hang vertically from the ceiling, and we project off of a reflective floor up through some materials, and then it gives the illusion of a hologram. And that is done with a black background or a dark background. But we have replaced the projectors and the reflective floor with just a giant bed of LEDs. Turn the brightness all the way up. You lose the black background, and you can have audience back there. You can have anything. Plus, we've also goofed around with projection mapping. We could projection map onto the back and actually build an entire world.
And is the hologram 360?
It's-
If I
well,
was watching it from
We're going to have to wrap it there. And if
We
you
can
want to
talk-
take these
we'll
questions
talk afterwards.
offline, that'd be great. Thank you very much, everyone, for coming.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah.